last two videos, we discussed the importance of the spiritual worldview and the current materialistic perspective we have. After a short review, this video will introduce the two major symbols in Christology. To start, we know that reality is complicated. Composed at the base level of an infinite array of shape-shifting atoms, it is impossible to perceive reality at once in its entirety. Therefore, depending on the question we want to answer, we must perceive reality from a specific perspective, or lens, that simplifies it. For example, the goal of science is to discover how the material world technically works. Therefore, science views reality through the lens of mechanical causality. When we use science, we ask ourselves, what is this made of, and how does it work? We artificially warp our perception through controlled experiments. We change our perspective by looking at the world through microscopes, X-rays, or telescopes. To achieve its goal of technical knowledge, this perspective is quite useful. The benefit of science has been enormous, as it has totally transformed our power over the physical world. However, this scientific perspective is just one perspective. It is a specific lens, and with it come unique insights and blind spots. The blind spot of science is meaning and values. As humans, we are embodied beings, and for our life to have subjective meaning, we must perceive reality through a different perspective that provides meaning. In Genesis 1, we read that, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." To perceive the world spiritually, we must perceive it as a mixture of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are two broad categories that make up every element of existence. Heaven is the spiritual realm. It is the realm where ideas, concepts, and abstractions dwell. It is an invisible realm that is usually too abstract to be grasped directly. On the other hand, earth is the material, visible, or seen realm. Raw earth is simply chaotic atoms. Like mud or clay, it is formless and meaningless. All things in physical reality consist in part of earth, since they are composed at the base level of atoms. In order to have conscious perception, we perceive heavenly categories, or patterns, manifesting themselves in the physical world. In other words, the only way that reality can exist is as a metaphor that simplifies it. To understand this, consider an example about the formation of our perception of a chair. At the base level of reality, we see just infinite atoms. However, these atoms can be grouped into shapes. At the bottom, we see 4 wooden legs. There is an enclosed surface above. We see comfortable material made for a human. There is back construction, a seat, and armchairs. Therefore, we can deduce that this object can support weight, and is shaped like a seated human. Combining the fact that this object can support weight and is shaped to a human, we recognize this image as a chair. At the bottom of the hierarchy are base atoms, earthly facts. At the top of the hierarchy is an abstract principle, chair, which is perceptible to us through the organization of facts. Indeed, there are infinite versions of chairs, and none of them can be defined solely by earth or atoms. Our perception relies on abstract principles which do not exist purely in material reality. Because our perception is communicated through language, it is useful to consider how language itself is the union of heaven and earth. At the bottom of the picture, there are 36 marks. These marks are similar to raw earth. They are formless and carry no meaning. However, if they are arranged properly, these marks can be formed into 13 letters. The letters are symbols of sounds. On the next level, we see the letters organized into a specific pattern of a sequence of sounds to form words. As words, the letters work together to symbolize a more abstract concept. Finally, at the top, we see that by working together, the words symbolize the pattern of a concept with spiritual meaning. This allows an abstract, heavenly principle to have tangible existence in the world. The sentence is the union of earthly and heavenly components, and this intercourse creates knowledge. When the facts of reality embody a spiritual meaning, this is known as a symbol. As described in the previous two examples of a chair and language, we know that our consciousness exists as a set of metaphors, or symbols. We organize the facts around us into patterns, or groups, so that these patterns of facts embody unseen heavenly principles. In this way, metaphors and symbols allow us to perceive the base level earth we inhabit through a hierarchy of heaven and earth. Truth, or knowledge, is when our symbol, metaphor, or abstraction match with the base facts of reality. In other words, the union of heaven and earth is knowledge. In biblical cosmology, the universe is considered the incarnation of divine language, the Logos. Just as in human language words describe the pattern of objects, in divine language, the Logos organizes all facts of reality into a pattern of heavenly principles and infuses them with spiritual meaning. Therefore, it is the Logos, or the Word, of God that creates reality. Not only does Genesis describe the cosmos as created by the Word of God, this is echoed in the prologue to John's Gospel, where we read, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be." Although our human language is written using words that have no connection, in physical appearance, to their meaning, symbols take the shape of the meaning they convey. Through symbolism, divine language unites meaning and fact, as events are both spiritually significant and factually true at once. Because of this, the spiritual worldview allows us to perceive reality as a series of microcosms, or embedded representations of its cosmic principles. Reality becomes a series of fractal patterns, like two mirrors facing each other, or Russian nesting dolls. This means that each part of the pattern is a miniature version of the whole. In mathematics, the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio are fractal patterns that describe many elements of reality. In this fractal pattern, we see that each miniature part contains an image of the whole within it. Not surprisingly, this pattern incarnates itself in everything from the shape of flowers and seashells to the human body and Egyptian pyramids. Even the shape of the Milky Way galaxy is an incarnation of this fractal pattern. These fractal patterns form the foundation of human consciousness and are the key to unlocking the spiritual worldview disseminated in the Bible. For example, in the macrocosm, the universe consists of abstract heaven and corporal earth. In the microcosm, a written word has intangible meaning supported by tangible marks. The same pattern is evident on both levels of reality, micro and macrocosm. Miracles are symbols. They are facts that reflect spiritual truth. For example, Moses parting the Red Sea is a miniature version of God separating the primordial waters. Mosaic law itself is the translation of a higher spiritual language down into a lower base material reality. From a spiritual perspective, attempting to explain a miracle with mechanical causality would be the equivalent of detailing the steps required to construct a written word with marks. Instead, these events should be explained from the perspective they were written, and through the meaning they illustrate. A seemingly cryptic example of the pattern of heaven and earth is described by the prophet Ezekiel in his famous vision of the Tetramorph. Ezekiel described his vision, writing, "As I was among the captives by the river Kabar, the heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. A stormy wind came from the north, a great cloud with fire flashing up. From its center came an image of 4 living beings that looked like the image of a human. Each cherubim had 4 faces, a human, a lion on the right, a bull on the left, and an eagle. Over the heads of the living beings was an image of an expanse, and on it was an image of a throne, and on the image of the throne was an image that looked like a human." To our modern scientific lens, this passage describing the Tetramorph is entirely cryptic. It seems like the result of a schizophrenic episode, a misfiring of neurons, possibly set off by a chemical reaction caused by a psychedelic drug. However, interpreted through the lens it was written, Ezekiel was using symbolism to describe the structure of reality and divine knowledge. Although the symbols to fully interpret the Tetramorph have not yet been introduced, an introductory analysis can be made. At the bottom, or on the earth, are the bull and lion. They represent corporal existence, brute power. At the top is the eagle, which is elusive and flies in the heavens. At the center of the structure is the human, who mediates between heaven and earth as the knower who unites the two. To understand how these spiritual patterns incarnate themselves in reality, concrete examples like these are required. Luckily, the Bible is full of these patterns. The next video will examine the hierarchy of heaven and earth described in the days of creation, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and wisdom and understanding in Proverbs. Each of these are microcosms, or miniature versions of the macrocosmic meta-pattern that describes the structure of reality accessible to human consciousness. Therefore, the examples in the following video will serve as a meditation on the structure of human consciousness in the cosmos.